Greetings, Taku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you all the return of the Favorite Heroes video segment right here on Otaku Assemble! Weekly, and finally here to bring you all a brand spanking new Favorite Heroes video. Now, the Favorite Heroes segment, along with the Favorite Villain segment, these are segments I started back in 2011 right along with the anime favorites, and I decided to go ahead and resurrect this segment, and I decided to go back and revisit these characters because I just got done talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender in my anime favorite segment. And so, seeing as how, although I've discussed these characters on camera before, these videos aren't on the OAW YouTube channel. They were actually on my Rogues Gallery Incorporated collab channel back then when I decided to move the segment over there. So I thought now was as good a time as any to go ahead, bring the segment back home to OAW, and I thought revisiting these characters several years down the line, I thought it'd be an interesting thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and discuss my favorite hero from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and that's none other than Zuko. Now, Zuko's an interesting character, and he probably has what I would regard as the biggest transformation or the biggest character change in the series. Zuko serves as a primary antagonist for the first season, and then in the second season, while he's still somewhat of a secondary antagonist, this is when we start to see his shift over to what could be considered somewhat of an anti-hero. But by the second half of the third season, Zuko's made a full transformation into being a protagonist and to being a hero in his own right. Now, what made Zuko such an interesting character to me, Zuko is one of the most relatable characters that I've been introduced to in an anime series. There are many things about Zuko's personality that I can relate to personally, and I've often made the comment that I was Zuko when I was 14, 15 years old. First, let's go into Zuko's backstory. Let's go into his background. Now, Zuko comes from a tragic backstory, and he comes from somewhat of a very broken and dysfunctional home. Zuko is the crown prince of the Fire Nation, who the Fire Nation as a whole serves as the antagonist for the Avatar: The Last Airbender series. Zuko being the crown prince, however, of course, he is one of the main front runners in the conflict of the story. And the thing with Zuko is he's one of the outliers in his family, along with his uncle Iroh. They're both the outliers because they aren't necessarily conquerors and they aren't hell-bent on world domination like Zuko's father Ozai or his sister Azula or even their grandfather Azulan. And we find out in Zuko's backstory, first we learn of how Zuko got exiled from the Fire Nation, how he was almost entirely disowned by the royal family, and how he got the scar on his face in the first place. And that was because Zuko was invited to attend a war meeting with his father, who's the Fire Lord, and with the generals of the Fire Nation army. And upon learning of one of the generals' plans to sacrifice some Fire Nation soldiers so that they can get the upper hand in a battle, Zuko spoke out. After that happened, Zuko was challenged to an Agni Kai, which is a fire duel. And being the crown prince, of course, you know, Zuko is a very proud individual. He can't turn down such of a challenge. But Zuko learns that his opponent in the Agni Kai is not the general he spoke against. It's actually his father, Fire Lord Ozai, because Zuko spoke out in his father's throne room, which is a big no-no. And yes, this was very much an unfair fight. It was very much child abuse, probably one of the most horrific depictions of child abuse that I could have imagined to see in what is still regarded as a children's television series. And Zuko is scarred on his face by his father. And then after that, he's disowned and he's exiled from the Fire Nation. And even get this, Zuko is given an impossible task in order to get back into the fold, to get back into his family, to get back into the Fire Nation. He is told that he has to capture the Avatar and return him to the Fire Nation. And at the time, the Avatar was nowhere to be found. For almost 100 years, the Avatar was nowhere to be found. And it just so happens, long after Zuko's exile, the Avatar resurfaces. And that's pretty much that becomes Zuko's driving force. That becomes his main goal and his major objective in the series, is to capture Aang, return him to the Fire Nation, and take his place as the Crown Prince again. But of course, things don't work out to Zuko's plan. Aang, as young as he is still formidable. He has Katara and Sokka. He has friends that help keep him out of the Fire Nation clutches, and then things get even worse for Zuko. Zuko is no longer trusted to handle this task, and his younger sister Azula is put in charge of capturing and returning the Avatar. At this point in time, Zuko then becomes an enemy of the Fire Nation. He becomes a criminal wanted by the Fire Nation. And it takes a lot of soul searching, and then it takes a lot of steps back for Zuko to finally decide to aid his sister in apprehending Aang. And even then, it's only done under the premise that they killed Aang. And of course, we learn that, of course, Aang is not dead, that he survives the battle that him and Katara had to endure against Zuko and Azula in the season 2 finale, The Crossroads of Destiny. But even then, Zuko is brought back home into the fold under this false premise, and he's struggling with it. And it's not until halfway through season 3 when Zuko finally admits that, no, I didn't kill the Avatar, and no, I don't want, I thought that all I would want is to come back home and be Prince again, and that I'd be happy, but I'm not. Why? Because I'm not being true to myself. Zuko, much like his uncle, they're outliers in their family because they're actually gentle at heart. They want peace. They want harmony and camaraderie amongst other people. They don't want to conquer or be rulers or dictators or anything like that over anybody. But when you're in a family as dysfunctional as his, yeah, Zuko's pretty much the black sheep. And when he finally realizes that for himself, that's when he musters up the courage to stand up to his father, to leave the Fire Nation, and he decides to team up with Aang, not only to defeat the Fire Lord, but he even decides to become Aang's firebending master. And so all of these things, I mean, it's a hell of a journey, especially because in the series, I believe Zuko's about 15, 16, yeah, he's 15 at the start, and I think he's 16 by the end of the series. And for such a young age, and I mean that's pretty much the age where a lot of young people are slowly but surely starting to learn who they are themselves. For some, they're just starting that quest. For others, they're in the midst of it. And it doesn't end, of course, as we get older, as we start to mature, we start to learn these truths about ourselves. But Zuko, just seeing all of the anguish and all of the things he's been pitted up against in the series, it's really admirable. And I see a lot of myself in Zuko, how Zuko's one of his probably his major flaw is that he's very angry. He's a very vengeful soul. He has a temper that is very well illustrated by his ferocity in battle. Zuko is he's the only one of his family that cannot produce lightning in his bending because he does not have the peace of mind. He doesn't have the calm of mind in order to produce lightning. All he can do is just regular fire bending, and he's one of the strongest firebenders in the series. But even that one hiccup, it puts him down here in terms of the mastery of firebending and what a firebender is capable of in comparison to his family. He's not a better firebender than Azula. He's not a better firebender than Ozai or Iroh. But he rolls with it. He rolls with the punches. He takes those faults. I will say this though, Zuko does have a lot of redeeming qualities. He does have a strong sense of what's right and wrong. It's just that with all of the influences around him, he questions it. And yeah, he struggles with that inner doubt. He struggles with that inner fear. But when he is hell-bent on something and when he has that clear goal in front of him, he goes at it. He has so much passion and drive. And once again, illustrated by what he is. He's a firebender. You know, yes, you get the anger, you get the rage, you get the vengefulness, true, but you also get the drive and the passion and the determination. And my favorite quality of Zuko is he is a very prideful person. Even if it gets to the point where that pride is actually his downfall, which we do see occur multiple times in the series. You know, and there is that old saying, pride cometh before a fall, and Zuko's fell. He's fell a lot. He's fell a lot. But Zuko's whole journey throughout the series is one of redemption. And by the time we get to the finale, where he has that conversation with his uncle after their big falling out, after Zuko betrayed his uncle, who's pretty much the closest thing that his uncle is, for all intent and purpose, might as well be his real father. Not biologically speaking, but Iroh was the one who was there for him, who mentored him, who nourished him, trained him, everything. And to betray that man, and then by the series end, for his uncle to take him back into his arms unconditionally. He didn't say you had to go capture the Avatar, or you had to go do this, or you had to go do that. All Zuko did was apologize, and his uncle took him right back. And I love, my favorite moment in the series is when Iroh's talking to Zuko, and Iroh tells him, because Zuko expects Iroh to be the one to actually defeat Ozai and take his place as Fire Lord, since Iroh is the elder between him and Ozai. Iroh was actually stepped over to be Fire Lord. In many ways, how Zuko was stepped over in being in charge of capturing Aang. So when Zuko goes to Iroh and he asks him, oh, you're going to, fight my dad, and Iroh says no, because the world would only see it as a brother killing another brother to assume power. He says it has to be somebody with unquestionable honor. And he says it has to be you, Zuko. And Zuko says, but unquestionable honor is like, but I've made so much mistakes. And Iroh tells him, he's like, you have. It's like, you have struggled, you have suffered, but in the end, you've restored your own honor, and only you can restore the honor of the Fire Nation. I'm trying not to tear up on camera while I'm reciting that, but like that, man, when I saw that, I was like, oh. And when Zuko showed up to face Azula, to become Fire Lord in that final Agni Kai, I was, man. And then even then, what happened? Zuko loses that battle, not because Azula's better than him, but because Zuko sacrificed himself to save Katara. That's the type of person Zuko is at heart, and that's the type of person he's always been. It's only once he was faced with the scrutiny of his family and of the people that he respected and of his own nation that he tried to conform to what they thought he should be. And that's when his inner turmoil took over. And that's when he was in the most strife. But when Zuko was in his own, when he came into his own and he knew what he was about, he went toe to toe with Azula. Matched her. Bam. Like lick for lick. Azula couldn't hold a candle to Zuko. So, yeah. So all those things, like I said, he's a fascinating character, and watching his journey, it's one of my favorite parts of the series, and it's one of the things that keeps me coming back to this series. I've rewatched it like over 20 times, and I'm always rooting for Zuko. He's my man. So that pretty much is going to wrap up my thoughts on Zuko, and that's going to wrap up this week's favorite heroes video. I want to thank you all for joining me this week. In the comments below, leave your thoughts both on this character, leave your thoughts on some of your favorite characters from this series, and also favorite hero, favorite villains originally was conceived as a viewer-generated video where you all would give me recommendations to discuss some of my favorite heroes and favorite villains from different series. I've discussed heroes and villains from, television shows like Game of Thrones, Sons of Anarchy, Supernatural. I've discussed my favorite heroes, favorite villains from video games like Kingdom Hearts, from comics like X-Men. I'm also very much interested in some of your suggestions, so please feel free in the comments below, leave suggestions from some of your favorite series, movies, video games, comic book franchises, what have you. And yeah, and I'll check them out and take them under consideration for future videos. So keep an eye out for my favorite villains video on Azula. That'll be up later. And with that being said, it's been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief. I'm signing off, and until next time, peace.